Okay, well, thank you all for joining us for our Public Service Perspectives presentation today. I see a lot of familiar faces. I think I know almost everyone here, but for those I don't, I'm Mackenzie Karski. I am the event coordinator over at the Voinovich School. Before I turn it over to our speaker today, I do have just a couple quick housekeeping items to cover. I know we've been in this virtual boat for a long time now, so this mostly should be, refreshers for you. But feel free to drop questions in the chat throughout the presentation today. We do just ask that you keep yourself muted throughout just so we don't have any disruptions. When it gets to the end, we will open up for Q&A, so I'll pull those questions in the chat to address. But you can also raise your hand and we can call on you to unmute yourself and ask your question. When Vicki's screen sharing, I do recommend you set your video layout to the side-by-side mode. So you can click the view options up on your top right-hand corner and select side-by-side, and then you can switch back to active speaker or her gallery view after she's done screen sharing. Last thing to note for today is that the session is being recorded, so we will have the virtual recording available on our YouTube playlist for you to play back and share out for folks that can't be here today. Before we go ahead and get started, does anyone have any announcements or other upcoming events they'd like to address? I don't see anyone, so okay. Well, I will go ahead. I'm going to turn it over to Sherry Gibson. Sherry Gibson. She is an economic development specialist here at the Voinovich School, working over at Coshocton Port Authority. So I'm going to turn over to her to introduce our speaker, Dr. Vicki Maple.
Hello, everyone. Well, it is my honor to do this for my friend Vicki, and I'm thrilled that you're all going to get to hear from her today. Dr. Vicki King Maple is Senior Director at Thomas P. Miller and Associates. She was previously Vice President for Economic Development and Workforce Solutions for a community college here in Central Ohio. She also completed a term as National Commissioner for Economic Development and Workforce Solutions for the American Association of Community Colleges. Vicki's an accomplished and recognized state and national presenter, panelist, editorial contributor, researcher, and consultant. She completed her doctorate of educational leadership at Ashland University. I've personally worked with Vicki in a number of capacities, starting with workforce development while at Ohio Means Jobs, as part of a grant team to bridge technical skills gaps. And most recently, I've had the pleasure to work with Vicki on a feasibility study report for the Coshocton Collaborative. She's an author, a traveler, a foodie, and most recently, a book author. It's an honor to introduce to you my dear friend, Dr. Vicki King Maple.
Oh, thank you so much, Sherry. And I'll tell you, I don't take the word friend lightly. And a dear friend is exactly what I consider Sherry to be. So thank you so much. Appreciate that. So as we do some expectation setting today, I simply, again, want to welcome all of you, thank all of you for joining us over your lunch period. And I remind you, we would love to see you on camera if you're comfortable with that. I understand it is lunchtime, so it's a judgment-free zone. So feel free to eat, engage as you wish. And then again, as Mackenzie noted, feel free to pop those questions in the chat anytime. We'll certainly track those, get to those. As for our agenda today, I'll tell you, we're going to keep it pretty straightforward. We're going to engage, we're going to share some ideas about how collaborative communities grow together and how collaborative communities win together when they discover the alignment of that modernized economic model that includes educational institutions, everyone from the community college to the university. So I'm going to assume that we're all ready to talk about educators as economic and workforce development partners. All right, so that'll put us off to a good start. And now I have to say, before we dig into that though, I am going to be eager to get to know about each of you who are joining us. And since we will be spending some time together today, just a second here, my slide's not advancing. There we go. Not that Sherry was telling any tales or anything, but here's the real deal, okay? Here's a quick glimpse into the real life of Vicki Maple through pictures. So there are several things that bring me joy especially being outdoors, singing, giggling, playing games with my nieces and nephews. You'll see me snuggling there with my Shih Tzu puppies, and then also traveling to 70s and 80s rock concerts with my husband. We have this ongoing debate over whether the 70s or the 80s was the best. We won't get into that today, but I have my preference. Also, we love foodie experiences, as Sherry said. And so for any of you food fan networks or Food Network fans, I do believe that one of these days I am going to be a Chopped champion or a top chef. So, you know, that's just kind of one of those dreams I have in my mind. But in the picture up on your upper right hand side there, I will say that yes, that is a real cheeseburger, and it is a real 8-pound cheeseburger. And we did complete it. We did finish off that 8-pound cheeseburger. We did have 6 others helping us, but nonetheless, we completed it. So believe it or not, though, I bring all of this into play because I have nearly as much fun in my professional capacities as I do in my personal life. I've actually dedicated a significant portion of my career to identifying the role of education and training within that economic and workforce development structure, and then to developing those ecosystems that really lead to successful outcomes for all of us. You know, I actually came into my current role as a national senior director with TPMA after serving 7 years, as Sherry had alluded to, as a vice president of economic development workforce solutions, I should say, at a community college. But I also had just the real honor, the real pleasure of also overseeing our 3 extended campus locations, plus government and community relations, as well as special projects and grants. So I say all of that to say I understand the work that each of you are engaged in. You know, I value those of you who are currently students. I value your career aspirations, and certainly I respect all of your roles, which I understand span quite a spectrum of excellence as I was taking a peek at the list. So now, because my employer is gracious enough to support me in all of my speaking engagements, I do feel a sense of obligation to put in a quick plug for them, okay? And I promise it'll just be a hot second. So TPMA stands for Thomas P. Miller and Associates. We're a 32-year-old consultancy. We serve clients across 42 states now. And we actually have 50 dedicated employees that reside in 13 different states across the nation. So, you know, we actually look at that as a real direct benefit to our partners and to our clients as it provides everyone with this access to this bench of experts with a variety of perspective. Because, you know, the reality is, and I think all of you can resonate with this, in our line of work, we all are finding ourselves at this crossroads of workforce solutions, of community development, of economic resiliency, and right there in education and training. And yeah, I'm just a firm believer that that's what effective growth strategies are all about, striking that balance within that intersectionality and doing so in collaboration with all the pertinent stakeholders. And I just thought of something that our CEO mentioned the other day. So there really is a Tom Miller of Thomas P. Miller. So our CEO, Tom Miller, he said the other day, he referred to us as a for-profit firm with a nonprofit heart. And I thought that was somewhat profound, yet also just really spoke to our passion for partnerships and the relationships that we build. So that's me. That's us. And now in the chat, if you would, if you don't have a sandwich in one hand, or even if you do, that's okay. I'd love to capture who are you. So if you wouldn't mind, will you just drop your name, your association with Ohio University, as well as just maybe a line or so, or a word about what is your involvement in the world of economic and/or workforce development. So if you wouldn't mind just dropping that, I'd love just to gauge who's in the room right now. I'll give you a few more minutes to do that. And I'm not sure if my chat feature, there we go. We have some popping up. All right. This will just help me as we're guiding our conversation today, because there's so much I want to learn from all of you as well. Brent Lane, oh my goodness, I worked on that Coshocton project with Brent. Oh, great to see you. Fantastic. Was as you get time, go ahead and feel free to drop those things in there. And just so we're all clear, coming from a college administration and workforce practitioner position and background myself, I will often be speaking through those lenses. But regardless of where you are in your career continuum, or wherever you are on your career trajectory, I again just want to thank you for your interest, for your time today. And I'm certain we're going to learn something from one another. Now, if we have to identify goals for us to work toward over our next several moments together, and I know that we should, that's the educator in me, what those goals would really come down to are, first, I would love to help you to define your role within the workforce development and economic growth process. Sometimes I call it a process, sometimes I call it a system, because I think it's a combination of both, as well as, of course, right now where we're finding ourselves in the world of economic recovery. Secondly, I certainly am going to implore you to identify your network of strategic partners right there in your region and or in the communities that you serve. Also, I'm hoping to really aid you in discovering your capacity of what you bring to the table, or to that whole smorgasbord, as we call it, of economic and workforce and educational development, and then to expand your capacity. And then finally, to recognize how to create a community win, how to create that community victory for everyone involved in generating economic growth and individual development, while shrinking that those workforce shortages and bridging those skills gaps that we're all too familiar at this point with identifying and hearing about. This is going to look familiar to you. And so as we build up on that, let's also transition into some effective approaches, okay, and some best practices. So we're going to cast this big, broad, collaborative net this afternoon and explore the power of collaboration and of stakeholder engagement together, especially as it relates to building an economic ecosystem. And I can promise you that we are going to have some fun, because that's just one thing I like to ensure, that we're going to have some fun as we're sharing ideas and illustrations for you to adopt and build upon. And those are based upon some experiences and the alignment between community partners and shareholders that I've enjoyed along the way. And I do want to call out and emphasize those words, experiences and alignment. And so what we're going to be looking at are those meaningful client experiences, those meaningful stakeholder experiences, meaningful community experiences, colleague experiences, and then also, of course, educational experiences, and then the alignment amongst all of those. So as I frame this, first, it actually reminds me, I have to say, of a training that I was just facilitating just a couple of weeks ago for the state network of community colleges in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So much like we've been doing right here in Ohio, they're reviewing their reauthorization of the Perkins Act. Okay, so within those reauthorizations, which we all know are quite rigid, they're firmly structured. It was interesting to note within those the flexibility that's been added into that reauthorized statute, into that language. Flexibility in administering career-centered and technical skills education, flexibility in promoting innovative practices, and then this call for more extensive collaboration, more extensive community and stakeholder collaboration. That blew my mind. And what they were looking at is more specifically calling out collaboration among state and local secondary and post-secondary institutions, among business and industry, and then also among what the law calls, and I need to pull this up because I want to read this direct verbatim. So what the law is calling other partners in the development and implementation of high quality educational programs that prepare individuals for employment in high wage, high skill, and high demand occupations, all with the intent to meet state and local workforce needs. I mean, I just feel like that reads like a page out of our playbook that you and I read from. And so as I pointed out to those community college leaders there in Virginia, basically put, they have this new opportunity to rethink and redefine their educational programs in the most relevant of times. And they're not alone in doing it. That's the real beauty of it. So instead, it's to be done in collaboration with those who can move them and who can move their mission and their students, which, you know, I like to refer to students as our future workforce, so that we can move them across the finish line. You know, it's about really identifying and creating and fostering that community stakeholder engagement process and system. So now, also noteworthy, I should say, and you're going to keep connecting these dots here with me, I know, is the language that used in the law calling for extensive. Okay, extensive stakeholder engagement in the development and implementation of all of our state plans. So all things considered, here's why I see all of this as a benefit to them and then also to you. How long has it been since we have been trying to firm up this model? It's been ages. How long have we been begging for and strategizing, you know, relations between our institutions and our agencies and our employers and our policymakers and all of our communities? And for how long have we seen those fingers pointing, you know, at one another, businesses blaming education and training providers for the skills gaps, and factions of those boisterous groups, you know, blaming agencies and government for all the public handouts. And then you have, you know, those private sectors blaming education for how many times have we heard this, operating at the speed of the academy versus at the speed of business, you know. And then we have economic development practitioners not always inviting you know, education and workforce practitioners to the table. So what we have seen is this just vicious cycle at times, right? So let's recognize at this moment in time, even amid all the interruptions, all the divisiveness, all of the opinions that are out there, let's recognize this for what it is. It is an ideal time, absolutely ideal time for building our outreach strategies. And it's an ideal time for ecosystem building and for trust building and for credibility building. So as we look at this very model, the economic and workforce ecosystem model, and your place within it, as you engage with other stakeholders, this is as good of a time as any to share a quote. I think that I recently saw published by the National Education Association. So there you have it. It says there's a big difference between engaging people and having a meeting. Let that sink in for a minute. There's a big difference between engaging people and having a meeting. So as we're talking about ecosystem building and collaborative engagement strategies, let's also look at what it means for true engagement, okay? With strategies, with action, with outcomes, not just looking at another meeting of the mind or another meeting with people. Let's actually think way outside that box of yet another meeting. You know, let's actually, when we think about this, I'm even going to stretch us, I think, as far to reach beyond even those obligatory consortium meetings and academic advisory committee meetings that sometimes we get stuck in, you know, as education in the academy. We think of those as our business and industry engagement models. You know, there's so much more to community engagement and business and industry engagement. And I have to take a breath for a second because I'm about to share a personal story, but it occurs to me that this is actually more of a confession, I think, than a personal story. So just prior to the pandemic, I was asked to speak at a statewide conference, and this conference was designed to bring together economic development leaders, workforce practitioners, career tech educators, and legislators. That was the fourth party. So, you know, we're talking about a bunch of heavy hitters, right? Well, the session title that they wanted me to present was selected for me. So instead of submitting a proposal, they contact me. They're like, hey, this is the presentation we want you to give. Here's the title. Now, I was, of course, able to create all of my own presentation points, but the organizers chose the title of the session as How Schools Can Work with Economic Development Partners. And if I'm being totally transparent here, I was a little put off by that title. How schools can work with economic development partners. So first of all, and this sounds like me being a little snobby, but where's the sizzle in that? Snooze fest, right? So what else though rubs me the wrong way? And why in the world was I a little incensed about it? Why in the world am I still talking about it all of these, and belaboring it all these months and now a couple of years later? Number one, I'm convinced that we all need to begin to recognize schools, educators, technical colleges, community colleges, four-year institutions, our K-12 partners, our technical centers. We need to recognize all of us as economic development partners. You as educators, you're not just to work with economic development partners. You are a part of that system, okay? We are all on the same team. It's not us versus them. It's not even us simply trying to work with them. And, the way I see it is it's all of us working as us. It's working in tandem. It's understanding each of our roles, yes, and leading change and leading charge. And there's a reason that we all need to be at the table together, educators included. And the sheer definition of economic development, I think, helps validate this point. This is one definition of economic development. And I have it posted here on this slide. Economic development is the process by which the economic well-being and the quality of life of a people are improved as accomplished through targeted goals and objectives. So yes, educators, training providers, workforce practitioners, we're all very much a part of that process. And that's why I'm going to ask you to consider the conversations that you have with other educators in the area, with area employers, with area decision makers, because I want you to consider for a moment, how can you engage those stakeholders more regularly, more deeply, learning to speak their language, helping them to speak yours. And I'm also going to challenge you to even reflect for a moment upon all of the articles, all of the news that you've been reading. Think about the questions also that site selectors are posing when they're determining whether to develop in your area or in the communities that you're serving. Look at the state and federal funding streams right now. There is such a priority on economic and workforce development, on preparing and advancing students and adults, all within workforce as the workforce. And that's why I get so passionate about insisting that we not just work with economic development partners, rather we work as economic development partners. But here's the catch to that is that we must fully understand and embrace our position and the other stakeholders' positions within that entire system. So let me take a breath there because I know I get crazy passionate about this, okay? I get on a soapbox, but stick with me here as we move into some solution strategies, all right? So in preparation for our conversation today, I actually reached out to several key stakeholders that I had engaged very regularly while serving as a college administrator. And I posed just a couple of very pointed questions. And I did so that you and I today could really lean into their perceptions and lean on those communities' realities and on the actual outcomes rather than just what I call the world according to Vicki. So instead, I asked their opinion on these two questions. What would they rank as the greatest wins or the greatest collaborations or initiatives or partnerships between themselves and the college that I worked for at the time as their participating education and training provider? And what could we, the college, have done better to support one another's goals, growth, and mission as leaders within the economic development system and as stewards of the current and future workforce? And so here's what the survey respondents revealed. So as expected, a majority referenced all of the robust co-op, clinical site, internship opportunities through the community college that connected students to employers, to key occupational roles in the community. Several even noted that, our workforce development training initiatives and non-credit credentialing for youth and adults was critical and imperative to their growth. A few even kindly noted that they just really enjoyed serving on those academic advisory committees and workforce groups, ensuring that, of course, that the students, the job seekers, that they're being prepared for current and future opportunities in select fields. And as we pause for just a moment and reflect upon that, let me again emphasize how crucial your relationship is as an institution of higher education to a community, not just there in the Athens area, but all of the communities that you serve. And I'm hoping you see this. I hope you feel that. So again, just back here to the survey responses again, 100% of the respondents, number one, responded, making them respondents, but they thanked me for reaching out and maintaining contact with them. They didn't feel burdened by it. And don't we sometimes feel like when we reach out that we're being a burden? 100% of these business and industry leaders, yes, even as busy as they are, they expressed gratitude. They expressed gratitude for continuing to communicate and collaborate with them because they said that's what they wanted. They noted how much they value meaningful conversation with local educators, with training providers, and with the workforce agencies focused on their workforce issues. And they appreciated us taking an interest in getting to know their business, getting to know their industry, and then soliciting their feedback, taking time just to listen to their feedback. So they welcomed these conversations and they valued it. Now, other responses, and now brace yourself for this because I have to admit, I'm doing a whole lot of confessing today. I had to sit with this one for a minute, okay? So I'm giving you fair warning to kind of buckle in here for a second. Others pointed out that sometimes we, the educators and workforce agencies, is the we here, sometimes we just need to sit and listen more. We need to sit and listen and ask the right questions, and to sit and listen without selling anything. So did you catch that? To just sit and listen and to ask the right questions and then listen some more. And they got very specific in don't try selling, all of the academic programs. Don't try selling an entire smorgasbord of services. Instead, they were very clear that their expectations for educators is to be present, to be engaged, to have the ability to react quickly and nimbly to their needs when and if they need us to do so. And one of the phrases that I absolutely loved that actually three of them used was to be on the ready. Just be on the ready to take our call when we need you, or to listen and engage when we need you to do so. Now, a few of the respondents, I also have to say, even reminded me that we also need to continue to improve at responding at the speed of business, as we mentioned before, not the speed of government, not the speed of education, but at the speed of business, because there is so much rapid, dynamic organizational change within business and industry, and also noting that such quickly emerging and critical workforce needs are occurring, and so they do therefore appreciate the more frequent contact. And I mean, that was a wow moment for me to think about. They wanted more frequent contact. So here they were, business and industry leaders inviting that. And then secondly, what a lesson, for all of us. If we are so busy trying to sell our array of programs, to sell our services, if we're afraid even to ask for their time, or their feedback, if we're too busy just checking boxes or trying to figure out how to promote ourselves or our menu of services, then we're not truly placing our focus where we say that we are. And that's on first discovering their industry and workforce needs, and then on deeply engaging as equally footed stakeholders of a bigger system. So let's lean into that whole, what is this whole ecosystem building concept, and what does that look like in terms of optimizing then your programs, your services, and then adding value to employers and community engagement. And I use the phrase ecosystem building, but quite frankly, I realize it could be ecosystem strengthening, rather than building, because I already feel confident in what many of you have already built or constructed thus far. And now I also understand now in taking a peek at who all of you are, we have a broad audience here. We have MPA and Masters of Science grad students. We have some faculty, some professional staff. Let's see, it looks like with PTAC, SBDC, social enterprise, some economic development experts, folks working with LDDs. Perfect. So let me pose a few questions. And if you want to respond, I would love to hear from you. But what I'm asking here is for us to think about, because I want us to have kind of this rich, robust, yet also fairly quick learning moment together. I'm eager to know, what do your community ecosystem building and or stakeholder engagement strategies currently entail? And what does the outreach or the invitation for collaboration feel like, when you're reaching out to them? Who's maybe involved in some of those meetings or collaborations or conversations? And what do those conversations look and feel like and sound like? Are they guided, or are they more organic in nature? And then how prepared are you to answer that call when the employers or the developers and the practitioners need you? And finally, are you able to respond quickly? Are you able to respond nimbly to their challenges, integrating solutions into some of their common workforce challenges? And how are you doing that effectively? Is anyone comfortable opening up their mic and sharing a response to any of that? And again, I understand there may be a sandwich in hand or in mouth. And if not, we can keep on rolling. And tell you what, how about if you rest maybe on some of those questions, and then maybe we could even revisit those at the end, because I do want to continue to learn more about each of you. So those are all questions that I pose because I think they're foundational for preparing some of our own best practices and key engagement strategies. Oh, and something else quite interesting and certainly worth sharing too, back to those two questions that I posed of my network partners and employers and their responses. Majority of the respondents also kindly noted, and they expressed appreciation for coordination of, just a second, let me pull up some notes so I get this right, coordination efforts, not just of stakeholder meetings or BRE visits or other consortia-based committee meetings per se, but rather of inviting them to actively participate. And so when I asked them to expound upon that, they referenced community events, STEM-centered educational programs, and in opportunities that were connecting students and career exploration efforts directly to and directly with employers. So I'm going to share a couple of those examples of some of the programs, some of the events and experiences that they really were still raving about. Some of these even 2 years later. And I should note, these are all programs that bolstered community engagement and, quite frankly, relied upon the strength of partnering, okay? These are all events that were coordinated, yes, directly with our economic development partners and our workforce agency partners, okay? So these weren't just college events. So again, we created these experiences, okay? We created experiences the likes of manufacturing and technology camp. That was one that was endorsed by U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown. A first responders day, an egg drop physics competition, manufacturing day, and this was in coordination with the National Manufacturing Day campaign. We also coordinated a healthcare exploration day, culinary make and takes, a college aspire summer camp and workshop, Career Express. Now, this was a really cool one. Career Express, this was a conference style career exploration event with on the spot interviews and resume reviews, and also a scheduling app on the students' phones, whereby they selected their own sessions to attend. So it was their first conference like experience. So now, again, I say we created experiences. Each of these events that I just mentioned here, these are hyper engaged, full out, hands-on experiences. And while they were led by the college, they were all, and I mean every single one of them, inclusive of our community partners. And they were all inclusive of business and industry partners and representatives, all of those people who make up our key stakeholder Rolodex, as we like to call it. So when I talk about creating experiences, what do I mean? And if you thought I got excited before, wait until you hear some of this. So the students and the workforce, the future workforce that we brought in for all of these events, they actually became, in that moment, they became crime scene investigators. They learned how to create energy. They learned how to suture on leather patches and on hot dogs, actually, to replicate how to stitch skin. They learned how to earn PPE, or personal protective equipment, the likes of safety goggles and hard hats, by completing and meeting various safety standards tests. They actually earned OSHA 10 certification. And in some of those instances with the OSHA 10 certification, some of these students went on to be hired immediately by city parks and street departments. And so when I'm talking about experiences, I don't mean just bringing students and participants in to tour a hallway or to look inside of a classroom. They don't just sit and listen to sponsoring agents talking at them. Instead, these students, our future workforce, they become empowered, okay? They become empowered by following a schedule, by coming onto a campus. And in these moments, I am telling you, we saw them emerge as mini paramedics. They were placing the EKG tabs on people. They were in the field with the canine cops. They were 3D printing with engineers right there by their side. They were tracking and reporting how many toothpicks and how much glue it took to complete their toothpick bridges, and then how much force each of those could withstand as they were learning to become civil and architectural engineering technicians. They were experiencing also becoming surgical technicians by learning how to properly slip on those surgical gloves without contaminating them. They were meeting business owners. They were meeting with entrepreneurs to learn about those business plans and promotional strategies in order to learn how to create their own business plans. They were also in the kitchen rolling dough and making puff pastries. They were on the floors right there in some of the factories. We took them to the helipad at the local hospital. They were learning by doing. And the students, these participants, they were absolutely critical as part of that stakeholder engagement process, because they were the ones who were directly involved with our stakeholders, with our partners. The stakeholders were right there witnessing and demonstrating and mentoring right there with them. And folks, that right there is the power of these partnerships, of collaboration, of adding value to employer engagement and demonstrating investment in the current and future workforce, even when or if it's just one success story at a time. And it's still one stakeholder engagement strategy at a time that creates engagement at a deeper level than just a one-time meeting or a one-time survey that merely checks a box. And yes, I do get passionate about this because I have seen it in action. And so let's actually even lean into that a little deeper, a little further for a moment, because my next point actually proved to be such a lucrative engagement and results-oriented effort for my former institution and our communities served, that I'm really hoping it can do the same for you, okay? So through the division that I operated, it was, again, Economic Development Workforce Solutions. We secured about $3 million over the course of a year, about a year and a half actually, through some grant funding. very specific grant funding designed to support training and education that would lead to job readiness or career advancement. That was our aim, okay, to secure funding with the dual purpose of upskilling and advancement or preparation for employability and job readiness. And my very first contacts for any endorsement, for any support, for every single application was always to go immediately to the local economic development leader and the local workforce development agency. It was that critical. So now picture here on this slide at the top, you see the anatomage table, okay? So if you've never seen an anatomage table, it's just one of the coolest things. So this is a virtual anatomy dissection table, okay? And it actually comes with photorealistic cadavers built into it. So people actually dedicate their corpse to science. They're then scanned in at the molecular level, system by system, then also to teach human anatomy and biology, and of course, all things health. I mean, this is some crazy stuff. This is like beyond Jetsons kind of stuff, right? And so while, yes, it draws student interest and it leads to effective educational outcomes, this also made quite an impact on local site developers who were visiting the communities that we served. It also made an impact on parents and alumni and elected officials, and of course, all of those healthcare and science-based employers. We actually obtained 3 of these units and created teams of faculty super users for each site, all of whom, of course, stayed up to date with technology upgrades. And they, of course, got super excited about showing it off to our community stakeholders, and understandably. And for any of you who can relate to my age, this thing actually takes our board game of operations. You remember operations. It takes it to a whole new level, right? And so then just below that image, you see the mechatronics unit here, which we also secured through some workforce grant funding. And I have to admit, this particular unit, it took some creative positioning to make space for it in our engineering technology lab, but it delivered on that claim to really enhance systems level thinking and industrial automation skill building. And I have to say, our industry partners, our legislators loved it because it's sophisticated and it mimics what can be seen on our industry partners' manufacturing floors. And our employers also love it because how many times have we been hearing that they want us to learn to integrate mechanical and electrical and automation software technologies for truly building a comprehensive industrial technician skill set. So as you can imagine, our stakeholders appreciate this not only because it prepared traditional students, the future workforce, but it also helped elevate and expand the incumbent labor force's knowledge of key mechatronic operations, everything from PLC programming to industrial maintenance and problem solving, all on a single unit that replicates a real world manufacturing environment. All right. So that transitions beautifully into our next point here. Community partners, I have to say, really do recognize the participation of the educational institution, of the active participation of the institution. So whether you're involved, with workforce and economic development networks and meetings and or consortia, this is really your opportunity to shine with employers and elected officials and all of these folks that we've been talking about. Again, this is direct involvement with the very stakeholders that we're in turn inviting into our solution strategies. And in my experience, stakeholders have not just applauded these efforts, they have actually come to expect commitment, a commitment to attend and engage, a commitment to link workforce training initiatives and educational institutions, a commitment to action being carried out, or assistance being articulated and expressed, and even requested, during information gathering sessions and meetings. Okay, so as we unpack what does it mean to be actively engaged, I think we also need to look at who are, of course, these networks that we're talking about. So again, when identifying who are your network or your stakeholder engagement partners, what are those strategies? Let's look at what do you want to become your best practices, okay? So take a look there, and I'm sure you recognize many. I'm sure you are involved in so many of these already. And then ask yourself, how proactive have you been in helping the institution to establish these formal partnership agreements with social services, with job seeker agencies? Are you taking a leadership role in leading your partners to grant funded opportunities, to WIOA funding opportunities, to the Office of Workforce Transformation, to our area workforce development boards? Are you leading crucial conversations that are clearly and effectively positioning you as leaders in the workforce development system? And are your partners thinking of you first for data, for career, for business services, for workforce and labor market contacts information? Are those community leaders and educators confident and aware that you are who they should be looking toward for staying abreast of state and federal programming dollars? And as we take it one step further, get involved with regional workforce priorities, skills gap analyses, economic impact assessments that I know the Voinovich School is so capable and incredible in leading. So, at my former institution, we conducted formal studies in each of our communities in collaboration with our economic development leaders, with employers, with our workforce agencies, and then invited dozens of stakeholders to the table through focus groups, through guided conversations. Those initiatives, they were all led by a third party neutral consultant. We never did lead those internally because one of the objectives was to project long-term employment needs for the most critical industry sectors in each area. So we were basically seeking answers to these questions that I have listed here. And, these were accelerated assessments that we participated in, 6 months max. We're not talking about some long, massive longitudinal studies that take years. We were looking at compressed research time, outcomes designed to deliver long-term impacts and solutions. Plus, we were then able to incorporate these results into various grant applications, into public presentations as part of philanthropic support efforts and strategic planning. And so I certainly don't want to beat a dead horse nor send you into a data-induced coma. So just as a quick little snapshot here, in one particular county, we identified, the top 2 industry sectors as manufacturing and healthcare. No surprise there. You can see some of the findings. And going a little deeper there, we actually dug into some of the subsectors and occupational projections. And we uncovered such data as what is the pervasive knowledge and requirement needed for occupations available to each of these subgroups. What are the skills required? Okay, and again, that's just a tiny little minuscule glimpse into key data we pulled from one assessment in one community. Point being, I urge you to get involved with projects like this, okay? To be proactive in them, to solicit them, to go after them, and to have these layered conversations, okay? Because of the criticality of engaging business and industry in genuine, meaningful dialogue, and then creating that opportunity to walk them through the outcomes and data so that they don't just end up on a shelf somewhere. So, I just can't emphasize enough, as we as workforce practitioners, as training providers, as educators, as economic developers, as we integrate and define ourselves as being allies and affiliates and mates and stakeholders ourselves, we will all emerge as strong leaders in this space, as partners in this space, okay? And of course, that's my hope that you've witnessed and will accept a common theme, that common theme being collaboration is key. And it's key to catalyzing stakeholders. It's key to skill building. It's key to helping employers recruit and retain and train and advance the labor workforce. And it's key to bolstering experiences and abilities and knowledge in individuals that are really counting on us, quite frankly, to help alter the trajectory of their lives, delivering so many out of poverty into prosperity. And isn't that the work that we're all involved in here? We're in human services, we're in public services. We are about actually serving the people, okay? And, this just occurred to me. How many times have we heard, of course, that whole notion of don't operate in a silo, right? We hear that how many times a day? Let me pull in a slide here real quick. So I was at a conference I was at a conference just before the pandemic, and this illustration made it very clear. So the speaker spoke very succinctly about how actual literal silos, how they're for corn, how they're for grain, how they're used for storage, right? And now I'm a girl from the country, but there's nothing about separation, nor the storage of corn and grain for that matter, that I can see as a benefit or a parallel to the world of collaboration. As we collaborate with our stakeholders, we want to merge, we want to fuse, we want possibilities to flow. And, a couple of years ago, I read an article in Forbes magazine where they were discussing the silo mentality. And most of us are familiar with that in that. So they present that as a mentality or a mindset when certain departments or sectors fail to choose not to share information with others in the same company or in the same sector, in the same work group. And the article spoke of how the silo mentality reduces efficiency, how it diminishes morale, how it will contribute to the demise of a productive culture. So just as we eliminate silos in our own organizations, folks, just as we create strategies for services and processes and programs and organizational change or optimization, we too have to recognize the same principles work for creating impactful, effective, long-term, scalable, realistic resolution for economic growth and workforce solutions within our communities and with the partners that we call stakeholders. So as we wrap up our time together today, and as you contemplate who are your key stakeholders, as you build upon hopefully even just a few nuggets of knowledge that you're capturing, and as you continue to explore and define your own best practices, I hope that you'll take ownership of the outcomes. And I encourage you to review all of the resources at your fingertips, embracing all of the creative strategies that are available, and spend time with your teams, with your partners on developing what those meaningful engagement experiences look like. And I think it was the National Conference of State Legislators who may have said it best. They said, there's a lot that can be done, and it's going to take everybody to figure this out. So don't try to go at this alone. Work with partner organizations, work with your agencies, work with your communities to identify, engage your stakeholders, and continue to ask yourself and your team, who are we missing? Who's not at the table that should be? Those should be a couple of your leading questions. The U.S. Department of Education Reform support networks, they created and encouraged the 4 Eyes framework as the purpose behind stakeholder engagement efforts. I'm going to leave this for you to review as we're going to leave the slide deck behind. But in closing, I really just want to thank you for what you're doing to empower people to realize their purpose and to really improve the lives of individuals. And of course, with that, I certainly look forward to connecting with you soon. I'm going to make sure that you have my contact information here. Would love to answer any questions, would love to collaborate in any way that we absolutely can. And so with that, I think we do have a couple of minutes left here for questions.
Thank you so much, Vicki. I do realize we have about 5 minutes left. I want to be conscious of your time, so I'm going to jump right into a couple of the questions we have here. Brent has asked in the chat, from your experience and your perspectives, which stakeholders tend to be either underrepresented or overrepresented?
Yeah, underrepresented, I'm absolutely going to go with education. And I'm not sure, Brian, whether it comes down to, I think sometimes it comes down to an intimidation factor. I ran into this yesterday with a client. There were some college administrators and also some K-12 administrators that we were just having this candid conversation. And they said, Vicki, we don't know how to go in and have these conversations with business and industry. We don't really understand what the questions should sound like. And then we're fearful that they're going to use jargon or terminology that we don't understand. And so I flipped that on them and I said, okay, let's talk about all this academic speak that we have a tendency to do. Because business and industry feels the same way when we start throwing out all this academic speak. So I think we all have to learn to kind of speak the same language. And so I say that To answer your question directly, education, I think, is absolutely underrepresented. And I think it's only because business and industry and education, we still aren't speaking the same language at times. We're not understanding each other's role and how we can benefit one another. Overrepresentation, it's been my experience that agencies, a lot of the workforce agencies sometimes send a lot of people in, and it can kind of overwhelm or dominate the business and industry sector. So there will typically be more agency representation than there are business and industry representations. And so that's the only reason that I would state that, is because I've seen that and I've heard that frequently from business and industry representatives, but certainly that's with all due respect to our workforce agency boards.
Thank you, Vicki. I have another question from Marcia here. She wants to know, what do you see as the most impactful near-term solutions for the workforce shortages that are challenging many sectors right now and were even before COVID?
Yeah, the most effective short-term solutions. I'm going to say, let's look at our current workforce. Let's look at the incumbent workforce, the loyal people who are showing up. Let's take a look at them and what is their potential and their capacity for any type of advancement, okay? And take a look at this as part of a retention strategy as well. Okay, we need to identify what are their strengths and how can we capitalize upon them, providing them with all the necessary resources to upskill in some situations and or just explore opportunities for slight growth. If it's in the manufacturing sector, let's say, it might even be a supervisor role or some type of a captain role, in a service provider industry, because then I'm certain that as we continue to build their loyalty, build their morale, they're the ones coming to work. They're the ones showing up. They're also the ones who have friends that are out here, out of work for whatever reason. And so I'm confident that we're going to be able to continue to fill or backfill, I should say, the more entry-level pipeline, especially, given how prevalent this is in the news right now, that people are hiring, and there are jobs to be had. So again, I would focus on the incumbent workforce, the folks that we have, the folks that are loyal. Make sure, number one, they know and feel how valued and appreciated they are, and then also look at them for some advancement opportunity, and to be the walking, talking, breathing billboards for the industry, for the organization, for the company, to help bring in the entry level to fill that pipeline.
Thank you. And Marcia commented in here. So I love the idea of promoting and growth with incumbents. I realize we're almost at one. Do you have time for one more question?
Yes.
Okay,
sure.
Thanks, so we have a question from Sadie. She said, have you had any challenges with engaging with people, or what common challenges have you noticed with people you've worked with and who work towards being strong collaborators?
Yeah. Let me think for just a second here, Sadie. I would say the most common challenge is that of the frustration of once individuals do get to the table together, maybe not having the conversation facilitated properly, but then also the because of the discomfort or because of the awkwardness or because of that disconnect in language, that there are not action steps for moving forward. And so there's some miscommunication, there's some misalignment that sometimes occurs. And also, to my point earlier, sometimes there are more educators and agency representatives than there are business and industry in the room. And so it feels kind of lopsided. So challenge may be a strong word, but that's definitely been my perception. It's what I continue to see every day, actually, even in my role, is that there just needs to be a greater balance. And I think the only way we're going to achieve that balance of having all parties at the table is if we have some real solid informational and some robust opportunities for great facilitated guided discussion, but then with real live action coming out of that, and actionable items that can be attained, because that's the other frustration, especially with between business and industry and education is again that, okay, well, here's what we need. Here are the skills that we need. Here's the training that we need. But then you have some educators who say, oh, but you've got to enroll in college and then you've got to become a student. And then it's going to take, this 15, month course or plan of study. And, oh, in order for us to create a new program of study, then we're looking at another 18 months out. Businesses are saying, I don't understand your world. Just tell me, can you train people? Can you help me fill this workforce shortage or not? And so I think, again, it just comes down to speaking one another's language and understanding each of our roles and how we can connect and work together.
Thanks, Vicki. I think everyone, in the virtual room here today can relate to that challenge of, us all getting to the table and speaking different languages and getting on that same page. So I appreciate that. Mark, our dean here, has a question for you too. How do you influence top organizational leadership to understand the challenges arisen from COVID, which have reshaped the talent retention and recruitment transformation that's taken place, to reshape how they think and what the organization does in this area?
Okay, so let me dig into this. So influence the top organizational leadership. I think it's number one, tapping into the top organizational leadership and bringing them. Sometimes when we're in administration, Mark, and you get this better than anyone, we are so far in the weeds and we are so into the moment and within the operations that we fail to just take ourselves out of it for a moment to have a moment with our colleagues and or others who are experiencing the same thing. I mean, we were all thrown into this. And I'm telling you, when I went to grad school, I was not prepared. Okay, so as a vice president of a college, if a global pandemic occurs, here's how you need to work in and out of and through it. I mean, we weren't prepared for this. And so I think taking time as leadership to also take a look at how is leadership going to be viewed through and during and outside of moving through a global pandemic. That's key to have those conversations. How are we being viewed and how are we going to be viewed? Almost that legacy piece. But then also don't be afraid to tap into, of course, even some neutral parties that can come in and help facilitate and guide those conversations. Maybe taking a look at your strategic plans and saying, okay, this strategic plan or this comprehensive plan, it worked pre-COVID. But we need to pivot and we need to pivot now. And just having those candid conversations at times, those challenging conversations at times, but those very real conversations and having someone to help guide those along.
Thank you, Vicki. I appreciate you going over time. Does anyone have any other questions? Also, feel free to just raise your hand or unmute yourself. Okay, well, thank you so much, Vicki. I appreciate you taking the time to give this presentation. I think everyone has a lot of takeaways and, sharing your best practices and examples of being workforce development partners. I mean, I think that's the pivot and the shift of thinking of, us working with economic development partners and now thinking of us as economic development partners is my biggest takeaway today. Is, I think that shift in thinking will transform how we collaborate and how we work together. So I appreciate it. I do want to let you all know to please save the date for our next public service perspective session. It'll be on October 15th. We'll be bringing in Heather Raymond. She is the Water Quality Initiative Director for the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences at OSU. So hope you all will join us for that one. Again, thank you so much, Vicki, for sharing your time and talents with us. I do hope you all have a great weekend.
Take care, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.